I only work with good people who do great work. I'm not the most likable guy sometimes, but one of my golden rules is don't be a dick. In sales, if people don't like you, I don't think they're going to buy what you're selling. So, and I'm selling services. So I try not to be an ass.
Hey guys, it's Velio Matos on Packaging Unboxed. Today we are talking to Dennis Whalen. Now, before we get to the episode, just want to let you know this episode is brought to you by idpdirect.com, the only luxury retail packaging manufacturer that offers factory direct service. So eliminate those middleman markups and go factory direct with idpdirect.com. And our friends over at SpecRite, where they want you to envision a world without waste. So join the movement at specrite.com/PKG. That's SPECRIGHT.com/PKG. All right. So today's episode, we get to chat with Dennis Whalen, who's a sales superstar. Now, why the hell are we talking to a sales guy? Well, because unless you're selling art for the sake of art, your design means business. It means your design has to sell not only the why, but has to sell the product. Design is sales, 100%. But not only does he have an amazing insight into sales, he's also worked with some of the most amazing teams. Stranger and Stranger, Pearlfisher, Michael Osbourne Design, Primo Angeli, and a ton more of these heavy hitters. You're going to walk away with a bunch of nuggets on how to sell your creative. 1, talk about design like a business. 2, don't be a dick. 3, stay focused on what's next and help people sell more stuff. He also talked about having a point of view when you walk into a meeting. It doesn't matter if it's the right point of view, but you have to have your own point of view and be able to defend it. That's what clients want. Otherwise, they're just sitting in an echo chamber. They're bringing you in to see something from the outside, and that's the value that you bring. All right, do me a favor. Subscribe to the YouTube channel right now or the podcast right now, and you're going to get an extra 10 minutes at the end of this episode, which is a story from Dennis about what it was like to go into a pitch meeting with one of these big heavy hitters. It's a mind-blowing story. I loved it. I didn't want to take it out of the episode because it didn't make sense in terms of sales, but it was amazing and I want to share it with you. So go ahead and subscribe and you'll get that at the end of the show. Let us know what you think in the YouTube comments. All right, so today we're talking about like how to win creative business. We've got Dennis Whalen, who rockstar design salesperson. And Dennis, if you don't mind, can you just give me a little rundown on like how'd you get to this point?
I started in packaging design back in 1995 with Primo Angeli. I got recruited by a recruiter out of business school, and they said, this packaging design firm, and I had no idea what they were talking about, and went in and talked to the marketing people there, and it was a sales job, and it worked out. It was an amazing studio, kind of on the Primo was around for about 30 years doing just brilliant stuff. He was one of the legendary guys here in San Francisco, and I guess he still is a legendary guy. So I learned the business there. Went on to a couple of other studios over the years and worked in-house till about 2016, 17, doing business development, mostly for branding and packaging design firms. Mostly CPG and private brand. In 16 or 17, I finally realized that I needed to go out on my own.
And that just started in 16, 17?
Yeah, going out on my own. I mean, I was an in-house business development guy for single design firms up until then. I only work with good people who do great work. I'm not the most likable guy sometimes, but one of my golden rules is don't be a dick. In sales, if people don't like you, I don't think they're going to buy what you're selling. So, and I'm selling services. So I try not to be an ass. We're getting way away from packaging design, but those are some of my thoughts on sales. But I work with agencies everywhere from the front end. They do strategy and innovation, then a bunch of different packaging design firms. Some are big, some are small. Some are best on the planet. Some are just really good firms. And then people on the back end that do production or web or sales and marketing materials. So it's kind of like I can offer the full gamut of services, but anytime anyone says they do everything well, they're lying. So keeping them in buckets is really important so that we can help people solve problems well.
you say you're working with like best in class, and then, some medium sized agencies. Who are you selling for?
It's probably easiest to categorize, to start on the front end. So people that work really in strategy and then innovation platforms and stuff. That's a company called Bulldog Drummond, which is now owned by Envoy Communications down in Southern California. So they're fantastic. I've been working with them for years. I'm also working with a smaller firm called Nimble, and they are a spinoff of Character. And Nimble is run by a woman out in Atlanta, and she's absolutely brilliant and a copywriter as well. So she's strategy and copywriting. So we got a pretty good 30-person firm in Bulldog Envoy, if you want to call them that, and a smaller firm in Nimble. So we get the strategy baked and positioning baked, and we move into packaging design. Now, sometimes people aren't buying all of that. Sometimes they're just buying the front end. But if they need it all, we can sort of lump it together. When you get into branding and packaging design, I don't know. I'm working with some of the best on the planet. Stranger and Strangers, for 27 years, they've been just absolutely killing it in beverages with alcohol, whatever it is. And they still top themselves every time they launch something new. It's just, this is a $30 whiskey, Powers. If you like Irish whiskey, this is dangerously good. This is as close to drinking water, but it's whiskey, as there is. Wow. And this is a hint to you people thinking about sales. Always bring props. Doesn't matter. Your computer might not work. Your phone might not work. Bring a prop. And maybe share the whiskey at the end, but it's a little early right now.
Or at the beginning.
I have Stranger still doing work with Pearlfisher in New York. Not so much the London team. Locally, Swig is a 2-person firm doing alcoholic beverages. Revel, Revel, they're up in Sebastopol. Woman-owned and strategy-led firm, just doing fantastic work. Market Brand here in Marin. Now they kind of straddle between design and what they call the brand universe. After a design system is created, they sit down with a client and sort of help them build. What are those things you need for sales and marketing? Got a digital social media firm in Miami, Kaboo. Funny name, but hard to forget. And they're just fantastic. Ari Rolnick's done work with probably at least 50 wineries in California, and he's just really good. There's somebody else I'm forgetting, and that's my bad on the back end. It'll pop back into my head, and I'll let you know. So that's kind of the range. Again, small and large. The common thread through that, good people and just absolutely phenomenal work.
Right. You're a salesperson in design, but you're not a designer at all.
No, in fact, almost everybody demands that I put every pencil or everything down. The only kind of thing that I can help with in design is I'm usually more familiar with the client before things begin. So, and I've looked at the competition and I know how it stacks up and I know why and things like that. When it starts, if I get to sit in on the kickoff meeting or be at the kickoff meeting, hopefully that's going to start again. I can be an advocate for the client through the process. In other words, I have a perspective on things and I'm not a designer, but I've done this enough that I know that if you forget something, and the client has specifically said they need to see it, and you kind of forget or whatever, you design it out. I raise my hand. And I also stay involved because I'm an advocate for the client. So they'll often come to me when there's an issue that needs to be addressed. And hopefully they come earlier than after they fire the design firm, which rarely happens with any of these people. They usually fire the client. So not a designer, a business guy with an undergraduate degree in American government and an MBA. So not a designer.
All right. So then you go into, client A, you sell in agency B, and they're working on a project. You're on that project from start to finish and always an advocate for the client. So then that means you're looking at early designs before they go to the client and just giving your feedback from the client's perspective.
You're a designer, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I hope it would happen. It doesn't happen that way. I would love to see design before it goes out. I see design after it goes out. But I do not stay involved. As soon as something's signed, and this is another sales commandment, it's all about what's next. So I need to know enough about what's going on with that client and how this project is going and how it's going to work in store. But once something's signed, it's on the design firm to carry it through. I'm looking at what's next, whether it's with that particular client or within that company or just onto something else. I'm not a designer, and I'm much more helpful looking for what's next. And that's how I make money.
So to be a good salesperson, you've got to be able to let go.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah,
you got to be able to sell it, not fall in love with the project.
That's a great question. I've done work with big clients like Sam's Club in the past, where we created brands, and you create the brands and then you design a small subset of what's needed, private brands, and then you blow it out across the store. And you get involved in these things because in the front end of that project, I sat in 9 different focus groups in 3 different cities and all this stuff. So I was pretty close to the client and really close to the brands. And it is a little bit hard to pull yourself away, especially when it becomes a huge client in-house for a small agency. It's important stuff. And often what's next for the agency is really coming out of that early work. It's not another brand, but it's continuing to cement that relationship. So that's that's a hard one to know how to straddle, because you get both mentally and emotionally invested in a brand and in a project, and it's hard to pull away. But I am not the creative director. I am not the brand strategist. I am not the art director or the senior designer. So yeah, I can get in the way, because I get stuff from the client, and the last thing the studio needs is for me to hear something and miscommunicate it. And that's happened.
So if someone wants to get into packaging, right, one way or another, how can you make a lot of money in packaging? Is it in sales or is it in design?
Well, I used to say go to Facebook, but that's not the best place to go anymore. In packaging, everybody thinks packaging's going away, branding and packaging design's going away, because of the internet, or, people aren't going to go to stores anymore. Well, they've been saying that for 25 years, and I've done okay. If this is where your passion is, through school, or that you want to switch jobs or whatever, and I guess I'm talking more about designers than salespeople, but I would find the best design firm you can find, and get in there somehow, whatever that level is. Get in there and start learning from them. You can split off after 3 or 5 years, but until you learn the chops from somebody and know how to create mechanicals and know how to design and redesign in no time, and not take it personally when the creative director is tearing up and rebuilding your work, until you can learn all that stuff, you don't really want to be in front of a client. That's what I've seen. As far as the sell side goes, God, I don't have any. I could pull some nuggets out from someplace, but I don't know a small design firm that doesn't want or need more business. Everybody, even medium and large, everybody does, and everyone has a bad experience with salespeople. And that's whether you're buying a car or with design, branding and packaging design. I don't know if you'd want to come into this, cold like I did. It's a tough way to go to make the sales, because, if you don't make sales within the first year, they're going to let you go. And
Yeah.
So hopefully you get on with a big agency or a big firm that has a little bit of slack that you can learn during that slack period. You got to produce or you're gone. And I've been asked to leave a couple of times. It's not pleasant. So yeah, if you can, get on with a firm that already is attracting a lot of business, and maybe you do it while you're a designer, you straddle and you help out on the sell side within the agency and find out if that's interesting. Because a designer who's selling, that's a valuable thing, because you might be doing your own agency at some point, and by God, you're going to have to know how to sell then.
In terms of like all of the different phases in sales, what's the exciting part? Like, what's the fun part for you, right? Like, what gets you up in the morning to sell?
99% of this is the chase and the woo and the getting them through. And then it's that last 1%. When you get something signed with a project, whether it's a $20,000 project or substantially more, it's exciting. Because it's just like getting you to school or whatever. You've closed a deal. They say, we want you. Now, they don't want me, but, they want my people. So it reflects on me or the agencies. So it's that win. I go after the win. Mm-hmm. And I've lost and not even been invited to play on so many others. But, I've been at this now, like I said, 25 years. So, and I've never done any work with Levi Strauss, and I'm not giving up. Just not giving up. At some point I will. So
when you're going into a client and you're going to show them whatever it is that you've designed and all the, the why, the strategy, everything, but you say that that's not the most important meeting. What is the most important meeting?
It's they're buying Stranger, or they're buying Swig, or they're buying Bulldog or Nimble or whatever. To me, the most important meeting is the meeting before the meeting. You got to find out who's going to be in the room, what they're looking for, why, how they're going to make a decision, and potentially they'll share with you who else is in the mix. Maybe not any one of those things is going to make or kill the deal, your deal, but all of those things together, if you can get a handful of those things and provide that to the principal who's going to be making the pitch for their firm, that's going to be helpful. It also helps you because you're asking the right business questions of the client, even if that person's the creative director, it could be marketing or SVP of sales or whatever. You're asking the right questions about their business, and you care about their business, and you're trying to help them sell more stuff. We're not in the art business. None of the firms that I work with are in the art business. They're in the design business. And this kind of design is to help people sell more stuff. And if you can't get there, if it's all about, isn't this beautiful? Well, it's always beautiful. Every design firm I work with, they all do fantastically beautiful work. But if it doesn't sell, it's a one-off project and you might not get back in for several years. So my job's to help the client say yes more easily. So I'm prepping the client both by getting information from them and also giving them a little bit of information about what's to come from the principal, so that they feel like they own the presentation already. They feel like, they can make decisions because they have whatever you call it, inside information. It's just helping the client be better prepared so that person can either prepare other people in the room on their side or the people they're going to have to sell this to internally. So I'm moving on a parallel track with the design firm, and that could happen internally as well. If I was working on an internal basis, business development, I did the same thing. And if you skip the meeting before the meeting, when the meeting fails, it's your fault most of the time, because you didn't find out why. And, if you're not asking the why questions, if you don't know some of the answers to why they're doing this and how they're going to make a decision and who's going to make a decision and will they be in the room, and then once design's created, how are they going to review it and how are they going to make decisions and move on? And can we get all the people that are going to make decisions in the room up front for the kickoff? A lot of time in a large firm, that's just not going to happen. But you don't want people showing up for the first presentation and saying, why are you doing this? I mean, you might be able to explain it and stuff, but you want them to kind of understand why you're doing what you're doing and get them there, not have people come in cold. And it's going to happen to you all the time. But I'm just saying, if we can, again, make it easier for people to say yes along the continuum of the project, makes the client feel better, certainly makes the agency feel better. And I think it leads to better work because you don't spend time. Clients don't like change orders. So if you blow it up front or you just don't come up with, the right idea, you might need to do phase one design again. And that can be expensive, whether you have to pay for it as a design firm or whether they have to pay for it. You want to avoid that.
Yeah. So then when you're talking about going in and having these like business questions, right now, I'm being like super selfish, right? I've got a meeting tomorrow. I've got a pitch meeting tomorrow. Right. So if you're going in, you say, ask good questions, focus on the business side of it. Like, what's a good question?
I have no idea what you're selling, and I don't know who you're selling it to. And even if they're the buyer, they might just be sort of the connector within their organization. But it's who's coming to the meeting from your side, and why are they coming, and what are they looking for, and are there any allies in there that already kind of like me, or are there any people in there that really just don't want to have anything to do with me, that they're going to go with somebody else no matter what? But just to kind of find out, is this a friendly group that's going to get me or not? Let me tell you a story. I'll back up for a second. I was at a big company. I'm not going to get too specific here because I'm just not. I was at a big company, and it was a company I wanted to work for years, packaging, design, branding for them. And she said, yeah, come on up. And there were like a dozen people in the room. And this particular person, she was pretty high up within the organization, came in last, sat at the head of the table and said, let's go. And usually, I like to talk a little bit and this and that, and I like to find out a few things during that time. She said, no, I don't have time, just go. And so I showed, and I'm not even going to say who I was with at that time, the design firm I was with, but I showed our work sort of before and afters and, strategy and stuff. I didn't know who was in the room. I didn't know what layers of people were in the room because they wouldn't share it. They wouldn't tell me. I didn't know what the highest level person was thinking and stuff. So I had to I didn't have to. I went kind of down the middle. Anyways, 25 minutes in, she said, thanks, and left. And 10 of the people left with her. And we were scheduled for an hour. And a couple of people stuck around who happened to be, from a different part of the business than I ever deal with. And they said, well, what do you really think about our brand? And I told them, and they said, why didn't you say that? Why didn't you talk to that stuff? And I said, well, it's a little bit critical. You guys are a huge, really successful brand and stuff. And he said, yeah, that's not what she likes to hear. She wants to hear what you think and what you feel and why. So had I known that, I'd have been a little bit more honest. So I wrote her a long email, and we ended up being friends. Still didn't work with that company for that agency, but she was just a brilliant woman who had a huge job and had very little time for presentations like that weren't useful for her and her team. And it's on me. People wouldn't tell me, or maybe I asked the wrong questions, but it's on me in the end if a meeting like that fails. I didn't break off relationships with the people that I could stay in touch with, but it was it was one of the big fails in my life. So professionally, and it all happened really fast. And again, it's because you didn't. Wow. You guessed, and I guessed wrong.
Would you say that maybe not all of the time, but maybe like 90% of the time, it's just that's your one chance to be honest and be like, this is what I think, and this is how we're going to get there, and just being that honest, or why weren't you critical in front of her? Was it the pressure?
Yeah, I was nervous. I didn't know the other people either. Yeah. Normally I'd have found somebody in the mix that would have shared stuff with me, and then I would have had at least an ally in the room and stuff. Props. I would always go in with your point of view, or talk it over with your creative director or your strategy person or whatever, but go in with a point of view of something that they could do differently, or something that they could focus on to answer the question, what's next? Every brand is looking for what's next. Every brand. So if you've got a point of view, even if you're wrong, if you can tell them why, that's interesting all of a sudden. This is the end of a long story. This is actually a can of coffee sold by Target. This Archer Farms, at the time, this was 14 years ago, this was their high-end food and beverage brand at Target, about 600 SKUs across the store. And look at that. So I happened to be meeting with the creative director at Target. They had 3 at the time, and we had a great talk. And in the end, he says, so go to the store and just see what you see, and tell me if there's anything, you'd like to work on, or you guys think you could do a good job on. No. Thankfully, I bought that and brought it to the meeting with me and said, we want to work on this. This is bad. Right. Turned into a huge client. He gave us a shot during a shootout, again, a paid shootout. And in the course of, we did the first round of design and got to extensions within about 6 weeks. Archer Farms became about a $2 billion brand across thousands and thousands of SKUs. And for us at the time, for Michael Osbourne Design at the time, it was because I bothered to go to the store before the meeting and walk the store thinking about their private brands, whatever they were at the time. And that one just stuck out to me because I took it in more to say, why is this like this? Why is this really making you guys, is this really killing it for you guys in the store every day? Their promise at the time was expect more, pay less. This is expect nothing, pay a lot. And it's like, I don't understand how that lives up to your promise. And the creative director was just laughing at me because he said, dude, we're fixing that right now. I'm going to get you guys in, but I totally agree with you. So again, she might not have agreed with me, but come on, look at this. Anybody who's been around design, the Target people would admit it too. The brand doesn't even exist anymore. They killed it and they did another thing in-house, or I think they work with Pearlfisher on it. But Archer Farms doesn't exist anymore. It lived its life quite well. So go to the store, walk the store, go to the shelf, go to different stores, get comfortable with what the client's doing right now, and at the same time start thinking about what's next. If the best you can come up with is a line extension, different flavor, you might not want to mention that because I promise you they've already considered that. But if you can come up with something a little bit different, or something in a different aisle that's different, a nice stretch for something in a different aisle, have something. But it's just like with design, isn't this beautiful? Isn't enough? You've got to tell them why. If you can tell them why, that's when they start listening. Because if I'd just held this up and said, this sucks, and then stopped, right. That would have been the end of the meeting. But I'm not a designer, but I know good design, and I certainly know bad design. I'm not the one that creates the solutions to fix bad design, because Other people get paid to do that. But if you can go in talking about design as a business, even as a junior designer, and you're just selling this to your senior designer or your art director, talk about why. Because if you're not talking about why, if you're just talking about what's beautiful and this great PMS 201C is just the best, color ever created by God, it's just not so. But if that's the color that you want to be the anchor color for Indiana University, which we did, there's a good reason why, because crimson and cream was the base of what they were going from. And PMS 201C is just a beautiful, easy to work with. I can't remember what they use for cream, but easy to work with thing. But you got to be able to say why. That's what makes you valuable. But for the client too. The client's going to just love you if you can talk about why in relevant terms to their business.
Yeah, and it's funny because I do see a lot of times young designers will have a hard time talking through their design because they do focus on the beauty of it. Well, they will talk about a typeface or a photography style or color, but it doesn't ladder up to more sales.
Even if you're wrong, if you talk about why and you're wrong. I'd rather hear that than nothing, than isn't it beautiful? Because if it's just isn't that beautiful, I'm not even going to listen to you. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. And I can tell you why. But you got to start. You got to start trying to figure that stuff out. And sometimes it's just going to be a couple sentences. And sometimes you can just go on and on and on. If it's something that's close to you, close to your heart and your mind. So just start thinking that way. And start making mistakes in front of your team internally. They're not going to let you be in front of a client anyway. So you might as well make the mistakes internally so that when you do get in front of a client, you're both saying things that are smart and you're asking good questions that make, that help things along and are good for your agency. But just because it's not super eloquent and whatever, and you don't have 25 years experience, neither did I. I didn't even know what a brand or a logo was when I started in this industry. So you kind of pick it up over time. So
if you're going into one of these meetings, like, what are you selling? Like I spoke to Bennett Maxwell on the podcast. He owns a company called Dirty Dough Cookies. They had one store and now they're blowing up to like 200 stores.
Wow.
And he goes, his thing was like, he's like, if you think I'm selling cookies, it's like, you're wrong. He's like, I'm selling franchises. And he's like, that's what I'm passionate about. He's like, because I've never even made a cookie in my life. So like, what are you selling? Right? You're not selling the design, but what are you actually selling?
Look, you don't want to just fit in. Like, if you just fit in, then you pretty much are just right around invisible. And that's just not what packaging design's about, especially if it's selling at retail. So you got to figure out a reason to stand out as well. Maybe you're going to have to fit in the category for whatever reason. If you're talking about packaged beer in a supermarket, well, you're either going to be in a can or a bottle. It's pretty much a given. So you got to fit in on that, but you're going to have to stand out in your carrier because otherwise, and it's a tough aisle. Walking the aisles with your client helps you understand what they're looking for and what the mistakes they've already made. You're not going to know about those things. And sometimes they just don't come up until you're in a store with them. Sometimes it's in a meeting, but walking aisles with clients or better yet, walking aisles with aisles of, say, a grocery store, if it's a CPG product, walking aisles with people in your firm, whether it's other designers or the art director or creative director or somebody else.
All right, show's over. Thanks so much. And for those of you guys that subscribed, check out this extra clip that I couldn't leave out. It's just so good. Don't tell anybody TR Ranch. We'll see you soon. So you've been doing this a long time, right? You've been doing this quite a while. What's the difference in like a pitch meeting today versus the old days. I think you mentioned when we were talking before how Primo won some work just based on a sketch, right? Versus like now it's got to be different.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, Primo Angeli, Primo.com, I think it was, doesn't even exist anymore. Primo died earlier this year. I think it was this year. Might have been last year. Anyway, we were pitching a piece of business for Intel. And this, I think this could easily still happen at this point, because at that point it was for back to school. It was going to be twice a year, but it was a back to school campaign. And, Intel's is the processor. So it's selling the solutions that the processor helps you get to. So they gave us they gave 3 firms $25,000 or so to come up with some ideas around a campaign, which is a little different than a branding and packaging design, pure branding and packaging design thing. Anyways, the agency, the whole team, the design team and the strategy people came up with some ideas, and we're going to really had one idea that was just great. And so let's say that meeting was on a Friday. Well, Primo came in Thursday night to see what was going on. He was whatever he was there for, but he hadn't been involved. And he came in and he took a look at what we were doing, what the team was doing. And he said, yeah, we're not doing that. That's not going to work. It's like I can't remember if it was the why, if it was the design. It was probably tied to the why, and then how that translated into the design and potentially into results. And he sat down with one of those big pieces of paper that sits on the easel in the conference room, and he drew a picture. He drew some picture and filled it in and described it to us. And he said, "That's what you're going to show." And some of these details might be a little bit off if anyone's listening and remembers this story, but this is mostly the way it went. Anyways, we went to Intel. We made a pitch with Primo's sketch, and we won the job. And it turned into being a client. Yeah, it turned into a client for a couple of years. I mean, several $1 million worth of business, just because. And my guess is we wouldn't have gotten the first project, let alone all the others, had we continued with what we thought was the right thing. So, bringing a guy who's been doing this for 30 years or whatever into the business and his name's on the door, sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it makes things a little more difficult, but sometimes it's really helpful. So how are things different? The biggest difference right now, I'd say it's still the same thing. I mean, we got this Zoom thing. I still prefer person to person, but the biggest difference is you guys are so lucky you don't have to deal with slide projectors. Slide projectors, building a presentation and loading the slides in so they're not backwards or upside down, and showing the slides and just hoping that the lamp works the whole time. And the thing weighed 20 pounds and you're carrying it around. There were so many reasons for it to go wrong, and a lot of times it just did. That's why you take props. You always take a prop, right. Because if you don't have anything to show, and you can't have people holding up slides to look at slides. I mean, you guys don't have that anymore because you got your laptop and stuff, but it might not work someday. Plus, if you take a prop,
I always find bringing in props makes a huge. I always find bringing in props makes a huge difference. Even like at the end of a meeting, everybody's like, "Oh, let me take a look at that," and all of a sudden you pick up like five different conversations based off of that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, also, this is designed by stranger and stranger, so it's done by a client of mine. It wasn't something I brought in or anything, but at the end of the meeting, I slide this across and give it to the person who set the meeting up, and that's always a helpful thing too. So, especially if they drink whiskey, but I think that's the biggest difference.